Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Caregiving Insights. For our next episode, it's a fun story to tell how I met Amos. And we had met when I was at my storage locker in Pennsylvania, starting to clear things out. And this gentleman, Amos, walks in and we started talking, and he was on his way back home and to visit his family for the first time since COVID. And he was collecting candy for his nieces and nephews. And so he had a stash in his storage locker that he needed to take. And then we had a nice conversation and we connected on LinkedIn, and we have some similar backgrounds in ways in healthcare, sort of overlap, and we'll talk about that today. And then serendipitously, a month and a half or 2 months later, we ran into each other again at the storage unit. And we had a little bit more of a conversation, and one thing led to the next, and it made perfect sense for Amos and I to have this conversation today. So I'm thrilled to have Amos here. And I had mentioned to Amos, and he let me know that I'm not the only one that's going to defer to him to pronounce his full name. So Amos, please tell everybody what your first and last names are.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. Yes, and thank you for this. That's the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Amos. That's my first name. My middle name is Taiwo. If you're from Nigeria, the Yoruba tribe, Taiwo means the first of the twins. So when people say Taiwo, they know I'm born twins. Then my last name is Odele Ajakaye. Odele is that was my grandfather's name, and the Ajakaye is my great-grandfather's name. So I try to keep as long heritage as I could keep just in my name. And thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for being here. And thank you for that explanation. That's very interesting. I love hearing about that, having been very into genealogy and family over the years. So I appreciate that very much. So you had mentioned Nigeria. So share a little bit more about where you were born and raised, and then ultimately your education and how that led to the US.
Born, raised in the largest city in Nigeria, Ibadan, Nigeria. Originally, my father was from another state called Ilesha, and my mother was a princess from Ile-Ife. If you learn about or want to learn about the story of the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria, the story was that we originated from Ile-Ife. So my mother is a prince, and I'm princess from that town, and I'm also a prince from that lineage from my mother. I studied statistics and economics in Nigeria. Moved to the United States to further my education over 20 years ago. I've had education in statistics that I studied in Nigeria. I studied economics, financial economics, and international trade and finance. Then also, I went to school to be a registered nurse. I have a registered nurse license in the state of Pennsylvania. I also have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And in that area, I've worked in different hospitals and different healthcare settings within the state of Pennsylvania.
So let's start talking about caregiving and patient advocacy, because that's what kind of brought us here today. And I want to, my differences in terms of the definition, when people say, well, what's the difference? Because it's often people will say, well, I'm a caregiver, but yet they're also a patient advocate, and they don't realize it because they don't necessarily have a distinction that they separate. But I see it could be two separate people, although caregivers are often both. It could be the hands-on. They could be helping somebody get up and down. They could be helping somebody eat. They could be shopping for somebody. They could be, making whatever they need to do. They're called, the ADLs. But then patient advocacy, I see as more of an individual who needs to organize, coordinate, and truly speak with the healthcare professionals and they're advocating for them, or it could be they need to be getting them something from a healthcare provider here. They need to ask questions, they need to do research and so forth. At a high level, that's sort of how I see the distinction. How about what do you see as the distinction?
As a registered nurse, and I agree with that. It could be one person, or sometimes it could be two different people. As a registered nurse, healthcare provider, and also as a caregiver and a patient advocate for myself and friends and family around me, and also for my parents in Nigeria. When you talk about overseas caregiving, majority of it for me, it's more of the patient advocacy because I'm not on grant. My siblings back home are the one on grant to do that. But majority of the time, and since they don't really understand healthcare system, I would want to say, give the phone to the doctor and let me talk to them. And I have to provide guidance and get some care either within Nigeria or go overseas, either India or Europe to help and still follow through all of that. Talking about caregiving in the US, as a registered nurse, and also I've been through different health issues. Yes, it could be the same person, or it could be two different people. Caregiver, as you said, also it's really the hands-on. Either taking care of a loved one, either in the same home or just taking them to a doctor's appointment. You are really physically involved and you're really providing the care. Picking up medicine at the pharmacy, those are all the basics. Then the patient advocacy, it's really go further than that. You go online and do research and learn about the disease, and then so when because just going through cancer in the last 2 years, I call it when you are in the battle, sometimes you could be overwhelmed yourself. Even if you are knowledgeable even about all of this, either a medical doctor or a pharmacist or a nurse, you understand what's going on. But since you are, I call it in the battle, you are not thinking about all of that right now. It's just different. So you need somebody else to speak up for you. And sometimes you go to the doctor because you already have your mindset. I have to go back for every 6-month checkup. Most of the time, the few days before that, a few weeks, mentally it's just a battle. So you need somebody to go with you, because when the doctors are talking, you probably already shut down. You need somebody to hear them, and then maybe days later and say, did you remember what? Oh, really? It's like hours already gone. So to me, yes, caregiver part, the hands-on is critical, but the patient advocacy, I think it goes beyond just caregiver. Because you have to go out, do your research, talk to different people, try to get second opinion, um, and sometimes I call it push. You have to push some healthcare provider and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing in my loved one, and what are the options? And I researched this. What do you think about this? Okay, what are the options? And you take it back, you digest it, you talk to your loved ones, and you get their input. The majority of the time, at that time, as the person, I call it in the battle, the person that is sickly, um, we don't have a lot of options at that point. We just want to be healed. We just want the pain to go away. So that critical part of patient advocacy, it cannot be overemphasized.
Yes, thanks for sharing all that. And we'll get into your journey a bit shortly. A little bit more about that. It's interesting. You brought up somebody being overwhelmed or a couple of weeks before going in for that appointment. I mean, I can speak for people that I know, and that maybe they have scans, and then the scans have to be interpreted, and then they're going in for that appointment and they're overwhelmed, and they're not necessarily able to think straight. So it's a challenge from what I've seen, because if you have a patient who, number one, who just has somebody taking them to the appointment, not necessarily a patient advocate, they might just have a caregiver taking, that caregiver may not have the ability, may not have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the confidence to speak and to ask questions, whereas the patient may just be not there. So it's a challenge. So I truly believe that if you look back in time, when you look at education, when I was a kid, you had the girls who would have home economics, and the boys would have wood shop. But I believe that it would be wonderful. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe with a lot of people like us pushing, it would. I believe that the education system, schools, and I'm talking, you're talking, let's say high school, maybe middle school, they should have it's a requisite class on patient advocacy, including understanding what caregiving is as well. But because if you look at society, obviously we know it's just been getting older and older in ways. I mean, the baby boomers are I think it's 10,000 a day are turning 65. So, but there's not enough people to help in terms of patient advocacy. And when you look at it, that then helps outcomes. So there's a trickle, and that then helps contain costs. There are all these components that I truly believe. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree that patient advocacy. I don't know of any research. I haven't read of any if there's out there that will potentially leads to better patient outcomes, and that's what we are looking for. Based on my background as a nurse and health economist, I've worked with the top Blue Cross Blue Shield, and when I work with them, and that's the goal. We want to reduce hospitalization. We want to reduce emergency room visits, and then we want to increase better patient outcome, because at the end of the day, it will reduce costs. And so I agree, that how can we empower either friends, whoever wants to stand in that gap as a patient advocate, and also maybe some people are even doing it, they don't know that that's what they are doing. And sometimes when you ignite that fire in people and let them know, no, this is, and you mentioned the confidence. So sometimes you want to do it, and then thinking of coming from Nigeria, usually when a doctor says something, it's like the God Almighty. You just don't say no. You just go with the flow. Coming to the U.S. and that's where I found the voice that you could, say, what, what you said, it's probably the truth. But it's critical that that aspect of it, and majority of the home health agency or other agency out there, that they are focused more on the patient, more the caregiving aspect of it, also to increase the education of patient advocacy. There's the slogan that if you see something, say something. And I think as a caregiver, you also have that antenna in your head that if you see something, say something, because you never know what you say that could better that person's health outcomes.
Let's turn to your health journey and feel comfortable to share whatever you would or would like. We've talked about it. You mentioned cancer, and in our conversations outside of the storage unit, you were talking, and this is kind of what galvanized us to be here today, because we both started getting really excited about patient advocacy and the importance of it. So I'm interested to learn, for the audience to hear, and I'm sure I'll learn more as well from you, in terms of, you had a nursing background, you have a nursing background, and then when we talked about the challenges of, even for somebody with a healthcare background like you, working for a pharmaceutical company, et cetera, what were the challenges from the first signs of, oh my God, what is this, to then diagnosis that you had in order to make sure you got the diagnosis?
Doctors, all my doctors are at Penn Medicine in Philadelphia. And, I've been a patient there for many, many years now. So I would strongly believe, or say that it's a very good health system. So we have a very good rapport with my doctor. We email him, reply my email. So it was taking me through different, specialties to say, okay, let's start with cardiovascular. Maybe it's blood pressure or something's wrong. So we started the workout end of 2019. I was seeing cardiologists. I was seeing, doing all this tests, ultrasound. By end of January, we made a conclusion. The cardiologist said, "You are fine. It's not cardio." So then I go back to my primary doctor. I said, you know, I still don't feel well. I know myself. Then start asking questions. Have you ever smoked? No. Do you smoke? No. Do you live around anybody that smoke? No. Um, okay. I don't think you have anything with lungs, so I don't really want to do all that work in that area. But let's just do some scan of your whole chest area. So then we found a nodule on my left lung, and then so okay, you grew up in Nigeria. Usually when most kids grow up in that region, they may have some infection, when they were younger, but not well treated before, like a scar tissue. But I can't say for real until I do a biopsy. Okay, but now getting to March now, all the hospitals are shutting down. That is 2020. Now, COVID start coming in. So let me sneak you in there before they shut everything down. This COVID is around. We don't know what it is, you know. So we did the biopsy, I think on the 27th of March or 28th. I don't remember. He called me on the 31st of March, and it was 7 p.m. And I was like, well, why would a doctor be calling me at 7 p.m.? What's the big deal? It has to be big deal. So I picked out the call. I said, don't beat around the bush. I remember I told him that. Just tell me what it is. Is it cancerous? I said, yes, Amos. When I still think about that moment, it's still like it just happened a minute ago. You've heard of it. Somebody had cancer. You've seen it on the TV. You just always think it never be you. It's like, I think that's why everybody think like it could happen to my neighbor, it could happen to my coworker, it could happen to everybody else, but not me. So I say, I know it's a big pill for you to swallow right now. You probably don't have any question. Call me when. So yeah, I don't. Yeah. Then as a nurse, I went back to start doing my research and all that stuff. Then I have list of questions to talk to my doctor. I send him like a list of questions. And that is now my pulmonologist now. That is not my primary doctor. But since my primary doctor sent me to the pulmonologist, now the amazing guy also at Penn Medicine. So then we went back and forth. That's now rolling over to April. Like, okay, then we have to do more tests because the initial biopsy just to tell us if it's cancerous or not. Now they have to find staging and what kind of cancer. Is this carcinoma or this? So as it spread. So there's some more research they have to do. Then they came back, we think it's stage 1. It hasn't gone anywhere. Then we have option: radiation, chemo, or just be aggressive and just cut everything out if you can. Curative surgery. Then he referred me to another amazing surgeon also at Penn Medicine. And then throughout the whole process, based on my knowledge, family members around me also knowledgeable in this area, they were the one asking me questions and also because, as I said, I was doing the best I could, but I wasn't there anymore. So I need people to kind of lift me up at that point. However, my uncle here in Pennsylvania had another great friend, also a pulmonologist in Atlanta. So he linked me up with him. And this other, when it's an uncle from back, we call everybody uncle. So this uncle in Atlanta and volunteered that when I'm going forward my surgery, all my appointment with either the pulmonologist or the surgeon, it will be on the phone. So he will tell him the time and will make himself available. So as soon as I get to the office, I'll say, I'm going to call my uncle now. He's a pulmonologist, and both of you are going to battle it out because he knows what you know. So that was a great help to me. He was one of my main patient advocate for me. So he was talking what kind of surgery, they talk through blah, blah, blah. Then when I get home, then it will break it down. So, okay, we have a lot of rambling in the office. This is what you need to focus on. This is what you need. And it will read all my report and all that stuff. And that was very, very helpful to me because at that point, I wasn't able to speak up for myself. I was probably, I don't know where I was, but But at that point, I needed everybody, and everybody came up, and they were, you know, everyone in my family that had that healthcare background, they were, pouring in, and they were able to get me through. We had the surgery April 21st. By that time, COVID has, so it's already all over the place. This they cut through my chest, remove half of my no, I mean, not to really cut through. They have to cut the incisions to take the laparoscopy surgery. So now they just take half of my left lung out. So the volume of my lungs is shorter now. And you could still sit down when I talk for long. I have to take a deep breath. And so the second day, I woke up from the surgery, came to me and said, this COVID thing, we don't know what it is, and it's killing people. And we just cut half of your left lung. You are super at risk. I could keep you safe better at home than in this hospital because everybody has to come in, someone has to housekeeping, food service. So the second day, they sent me home, and I was, for the next 2 weeks, I wasn't sure if I was awake. I was asleep. Because a lot of pain medicine just to, keep me calm, keep me family, the one that came through and support me through that. The nurse would come in, and then the surgeon would call in, and they do video calls to check on me. At that point, I can't even help myself because I was, for the first 2 weeks, I wasn't sure if I was alive or I was awake, or I would just wake up for a few minutes, get something to eat, take some medicine, and I was knocked out. So those are critical moments that I needed somebody else to stamp, I call it stamp in the gap for me, and advocate for me, talk about how I'm doing, and say maybe it's not doing well, then we need to change some medicine and go pick up medicine 2 o'clock in the morning, even if they have to change medicine. So it's a very critical for patient outcome at the end of the day, because if I don't have those people, friends and family that supported me through that, been my advocate for those time, my health status will have gone worse. That means they have to go back to the ER. That means my outcomes is poorer. Then the insurance company have to spend more money. So going back to what you say, increase in patient advocacy will also increase the better outcomes and then reduce costs, which that's what we are all about. Either in healthcare or also healthcare, or you're in the government or not. That is the goal. Better outcomes, reduce costs. And I also believe patient advocacy is a critical part of that.
So briefly, what would you say was the difference between your understanding of patient advocacy, the importance of patient advocacy, from before your diagnosis and treatment, and then how that changed once you were then the patient? Did it change?
Oh yeah, when you are a nurse or a doctor or a healthcare provider and you are advocating for your patient, um, I think we were all taught in school that this is a huge part. It's not just giving the medicine, or it's really speaking up for your patient. You conduct your assessment, you reach out to the doctors, and especially in nursing, it's a huge part of what we do. Um, but when you now switch the seat and now you are the patient, it's now you could really empathize what your patient was going through, and really understand, and I give paramedicine this amazing health system because everybody came. I have a great team and a social worker, a pain management, a surgeon. Everybody came together and they speak with each other, and they have to help me move my health outcomes forward. And with my family also pushing through, going to the appointment with me, or if they're not physically local, they will call into the doctors and be there for me. It just helped me also to be a better healthcare provider. And when I'm in meetings at my at Merck, and I'm working on oncology drugs or molecules, I sometimes share with my team and say, majority of you may never have seen somebody that had cancer before, but I want to let you know what you do every day when you come to work. It's amazing. And I know Mark has this, I think it's called 1 million through the match, something like they do a lot of videos of patients that have taken through that, and I think majority of people that work, they see the video, but they can't really, when you see a coworker and you look at them and say, this is what I'm going through, it just lets you know the impact of what we do every day. Um, and it's just amazing. And yeah, it totally changed, how I make me become call it a better person, a better healthcare provider. And it just makes me uh, probably enlighten me more the importance of my work, and the impact of on, on healthcare.
So we know there's challenges and obstacles to patient advocacy in different ways. And there's a question that I want to break out into 3 parts. So it's about advice. So for all the folks who are watching this and will watch it over time, this can be additionally informative. So when you think of advice for the patients, for caregivers and patient advocates, when thinking about patient advocacy, what are there certain questions, baseline questions that they should be asking? When should they persist in asking them, and how should they persist in asking them of their healthcare team?
I guess the type of questions to be asking will differ based on what is going on with the patient. However, the basic is you talk to the patient, whoever that is, your friend, your neighbor, your loved ones, and they could tell you how they were doing and how they're doing. And based on that, um, because as I said, when you're the patient, when you get in front of your healthcare provider, sometimes you just shut down. You're just not even there physically anymore or mentally. So it's good to have that rapport over time. And if, I'll use the example of blood pressure. If somebody has a cardiovascular issue, if they could be checking that blood pressure before they get there and they're writing it down, something could show to the healthcare provider when you get there instead of saying, oh, the blood pressure has been going up and down. The healthcare provider doesn't know that. Um, then, if it's blood sugar, if they could write it down. And majority of the machines today can record maybe the last 20 values. So it's very important to me to talk to that person before, and then use that information to better educate the healthcare provider and say, the reason I'm asking about this is because, they told me A, B, C, D. And I just, since I'm also, maybe I'm just a patient advocate and I'm the one that also will have to talk to their caregiver. I could educate the caregiver better on how to take care of them in that area. And then, it's not about challenging the healthcare provider. It's just for information. After that, also, if you are not also very clear, you have to do your own research. You know, thank goodness for availability of online information now. There's a lot of website with reliable websites. You could go to like penmedicine.org has their own specific information. There's WebMD online. I also go to mayoclinic.org. So there's a lot of good, very reliable. So I will continue to say that reliable because there are a bunch of information online. So you want to make sure where you're getting information from it's reliable, and then you take that information back to the healthcare provider and also the patient and dialogue before the next visit. And major healthcare organizations today have a way you could always dynamically communicate with the healthcare provider. Like Penn Medicine, they have a portal. If you register within the portal, you can email your doctor there, or they have the 24 hours call. I'm just the email. Sometimes my doctor will email me, or one of the nurses in the office will email me, or somebody. So I always get a very quick response, and I could also copy and paste stuff I see online. So it's not just talking. So I prefer the email. And so then now when you take that information back and you could dialogue again, and if you are not satisfied, it's okay to seek out a second and third opinion. Um, there's nothing wrong in that. So at the end of the day, you collect all this information. You could sit down with the patient and say, "These are A, B, C, D. We've tried A, we've tried B, we've tried C," and they're all coming back to the same answer. So it's probably right. So now after we know this is what it is, what is the treatment modality, and then that's when we ask. You ask. Yes, we have. I had cancer in my left lower lobe. Okay, what kind of surgery? So even the surgeon even showed me the surgery, how it looks like in the video of it. So I before I even allow them to go through cut me, I know what to expect. And even when I wake up, I ask him, what should I expect the moment I open my eyes after the surgery? How should I be? What will I be feeling? So I mean, it doesn't matter when I woke up because I was no, I was in and out. But at least I have an idea, and I could remember because your mind is always there, even when you can't really move, you can't talk. Your mind is always there, and so I'm remind. I remembered what he told me what I would be feeling, and so we asked all this, and then 1 week after, where should I be? 2 weeks after, a month after, 3 months after. So we are all fully knowledgeable, and when we make a decision, it's well informed decision. So that we do our own research, we talk to the patient, go online, and look for a second opinion, third opinion, and then after that we make a decision, and then at that point we have to let them do what they know to do best, and then just follow through um, future appointments.
Thank you. That answered a few other questions as well that I was going to ask. So that's great. When I think about the patient advocacy aspect, so there are different challenges that patient advocates have. Let's say, for me as a child, even of a patient, I can take my parents and to an appointment, and I can go in with them and they can talk to me and whatever. But the harder part for patient advocates is when they're not taking them to an appointment. They then have to make phone calls to get information, and they'll inevitably get a question. Well, are you their surrogate? Are you their power of attorney? Did they, I haven't seen any paperwork. So and I've seen this pretty much in every healthcare facility. There's that missing component that you can go in with a patient and be the patient advocate. But if you're trying to do it over the phone or an email, it's hard. Even if you have been given that permission in forms and has been sent to the organization, to whether it's Penn Medicine or Cleveland Clinic, where I go primarily with my parents, sometimes I'll get that. By this point, they know me, so it's no issue. I've been talking with them forever. But what is your understanding of that? Did you run into that at all with people who were helping you, or that you have seen trying to help others?
So I would talk from healthcare provider standpoint as a nurse, also from a patient standpoint. So from a healthcare provider standpoint, there are a lot of laws about patient confidentiality, especially HIPAA law, that restrict how much information or who, when you can share information. So that's kind of where the call it the gateway or resistance comes from majority of the healthcare provider. And from my experience, also I've seen when a patient have maybe 3 children and only one is allowed and or on documents, then the other 2 maybe they're not get along in the family and they want to get their own information, then we get into that. So I think that's where it's a little bit more easier when it's a physical visit and the person came with the patient. It's the most clean and clear way to talk freely with a healthcare provider. So because the patient is saying, I'm giving whoever this person is, to come with me and talk to you today. And then the email, not coming from, if it's not really the portal, because I think the portal make everybody secure, but if it's just maybe Gmail, Yahoo, or AOL, now it's, everybody feel a bit, no, I don't want to breach HIPAA law. So that's coming from a healthcare provider. From my standpoint as the patient, all of my visits, I will have a family member come with me. So I schedule them in advance, and whoever is able to come with me will come with me. In addition to that, if I want somebody that is an expert in the family, my family or friends that in that area that wants to be on the call. So when I get to the visit, I will tell the person I'm meeting, so I'm gonna call so and so, and I want them to be part of this meeting. And I was like, hey, it's your call. If you want them to be here, then I'll call them on my phone and I'll put them on speaker. So that is the kind of my the way I've seen things work, either from the healthcare provider standpoint versus as a patient standpoint. We need to understand that as a patient advocate that also in addition to EPA law, there might be other institutional policies and procedures for that specific institution. I think that's where we need to understand that. And also, you're calling a unit to talk to loved ones, or you want to talk, ask about. Sometimes the person picking up the phone may not have the file in front of them to say, "Oh, Todd, let me look on. Are you really the person I should be talking to?" Then how do I even really know if it's Todd online? And nobody just know. But if Todd has been there physically before, and we've talked, so I could recognize Todd's voice, and oh, okay, hey Todd, it's me. We met, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, okay, yeah. Let me tell you about, so and so. So that's where that little friction comes from.
Yeah, it can be a complex issue for sure.
Yeah.
So if you, and I have my thoughts on this, but I'm curious what yours are. So if you have a patient who is cognizant of what's going on, not somebody who's in an acute situation in a hospital, because there obviously it's much more challenging. But if you have somebody who, let's say, such as in a situation where you're going through the process and learning and so forth, and you realize, all right, I need a patient advocate. I'm going to need one at some point in the near future. A lot of people, they just will defer to families, parents, they may defer to one child versus another, but it may be based on emotions or sentimentality rather than, hey, this person is a much better person that I should. Are there certain considerations that you would think patients should have in mind when they're choosing a patient advocate, like traits or so forth?
It's always would be good to have someone with some healthcare background. They help them negotiate and navigate even just the payer, right? If the person is Medicaid versus Medicare versus private pay or health insurance, some people don't understand none of that at all. Then we go to the health issues. So it's a little bit better if they could find somebody that has that background. And if they're not, majority it's usually next of kin or immediate family member. I mean, at that point, then now it will be upon that person that is standing in the gap as the patient advocate to now seek out that knowledge that they are missing. Either they go to when they go to the hospital or the healthcare system and say, "Do we have a social worker? I want to talk to them about what kind of you know payment or card or." So that person now have to try to go seek out. That's why I said that research have now come in place and say, now since the best way to help my spouse, my friend, my parents, my coworker, wherever you are standing for, is knowledge more knowledge I am about this situation, the better I could better help them. So they have to as a step up their game in that area.
That's really helpful for people to hear for sure. Um, this has all been great. We're down to our last question, our last topic area. Um, so with that, I'm curious what your thoughts are, especially based upon your background in healthcare, in the nursing profession, and moving on to what you have been doing with Merck and your overall experience. Is there something, and if so, what is missing from the narrative around patient advocacy in the US and in general? And what is needed to change that?
I mean, if I have to put it in one word, it's just education. Um, what you don't know, you just don't know. And I think education also publicity also help education. Sometimes you just want to wake you up and let you say maybe you need to look at this area. So I don't know what are you know organizations out there in that area, you know, in the on social media, on the TV. and then somebody will see that and, oh, you know what, I think that's what I need. Um, and just also healthcare providers too, from a healthcare provider standpoint, also encourages that and say, do you have somebody at home that could come with you at your next appointment? Because as I said, when you're in the battle, you are fighting, and you just don't, you have a lot of blind spots, mentally and in a lot of ways, emotionally. So it's always good to either, if the person can physically come, because I know there's, and everybody has their other lives also. Even just somebody to be on the phone with you and say, let me call my cousin. And with in this day and age, the cousin doesn't even necessarily have to live in the US. They could be calling from Canada or Europe.
Right.
Because the way the person hear things is totally different from the patient at that time. When I go for my 6-month visit early in the morning, I have to do the scan, and I wait for like a few hours to see the doctor, because the radiologist have to read it and then send it to doctor. That 2 hours is crazily emotionally roller coaster, because now you don't know what they're saying. So as soon as I get to see the surgeon or the oncologist, the first thing, I don't ask me a bunch of other questions. What is the scan showing? Then after that, then we could talk about everything else. So it's always good to have somebody, even if they're not physically present, if they could just be on the phone. Um, and I think healthcare provider also, as healthcare providers, we could help in that and say, hey, next time that you're coming, can you bring somebody with you? Or can somebody call in to also hear what we discussed, that you wanted to be part of this? And I think that is how all of us could be part of the crusade, um, to help increase patient advocacy voice. Um, and we know the better advocacy a patient have, it will increase their health outcomes, it will decrease costs, and at the end of the day, everybody wins.
I agree completely. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for spending the time with me today.
Sure.
And this has been wonderful. And I hope the audience who watches this in the coming weeks, days, months, years, learn a lot from this. And I'll look forward to talking with you offline more about this topic and other topics as well, for sure.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much for having me. And I mean, this is another way to promote and encourage all of us to be patient advocate. And I know some people could hear about the patient, not just patient. That's the patient, just be your neighbor, your friend, your coworker, um, anybody. You just don't know how critical that is to that person. Um, because when you are in the battle, I call it, when you're in the battle, just you don't, even when you are very knowledgeable in that area, you, everything goes out of the out of the window. So you need that person standing next to you, either physically standing next to you or over the phone, or um, you know um, some healthcare use video, like as they used to do patient care, and the person could log in if they want to show their face. I think it's so critical when you're going through that, and just have somebody next to you. The importance of it is it cannot be overemphasized. So thank you for all patient advocates out there, all caregivers out there. Um, you just don't know how important you are needed for a patient going through any health issue. So I thank you all, and I encourage everyone to be a patient advocate today, starting today.
Thank you for sharing that. And I echo those as well. And it's important for caregivers and patient advocates to have that feedback and to hear it from people, because often they go in a silo and they're caught up in their world as well, and they're not hearing it. They're just going and doing, and they can feel underappreciated. So it's great to hear that. So thank you for sharing. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will touch base with you in the next week or two, and we'll connect offline.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. primary purpose of the podcast is to educate. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or any guests. One Day, One Week and its sponsor, 17 Commerce LLC, expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use the podcast episodes or the information presented in the episodes.